What is up, folks? I made it. Just got off the phone with Mike. He's running just a little bit behind. He had to get a new phone, so he's working all that out. Actually, he just got out of the shower, and I said, "You should come on the live stream right now." And he's like, "No, I need a couple minutes." I said, "That'd make a great live stream." So he should be on here in probably five or 10 minutes. So I'm gonna look at these comments here and see what's going on. I just pulled this up. So we got Small Water Charters in here. What's up, dude? I think he said he is knee high in the middle of the spawn down there in Florida. We're getting there. I actually heard a report the other day of some spawners on Egypt. Guy sent me a text and said that he had caught, I think he caught a male off the bed and the female, or anyway, he saw them up shallow spawning. So that's pretty cool. It's that time, the full moon and all that stuff. Let's see here. Got Russ and Logan. What's up, man? Yeah, he says, will there be any talk about Lake of Egypt? We are going for the first time this weekend. Make sure you check out this Thursday. Me and Ron DeRosa and I are going to be doing a Thursday night live stream where we're going to be talking about fishing reports and things like that. So Lake of Egypt is a lake that Ron lives on, so he will definitely have some current information on that lake. So that's going to be Thursday at 7:30 Central. What's up, Phil? Let's see. Stephanie, how's it going? Bass RX, what's up, Kyle? Got David in here. Got DJ, Gary. Yeah, congratulations, Gary, man. You had a pretty solid tournament over there at Egypt. That's really good to hear that. Let's see here. Make sure I hit everybody before we jump on. I see Mike there in the queue, so we're going to bring him in just a second. What's up, Brad? Yeah, just like I just said, Brad, Thursday night, we're going to have some current local fishing reports up to date. I've been compiling some fishing reports, and if you guys have been out on any lake over the weekend or the last couple of days, basically anything before Thursday or the day of Thursday, shoot me a report, if you don't mind, at Gay Montgomery Fishing or 10 Horse Monty on Facebook, and then 10 Horse Monty 6 on Instagram. And that way I can share those reports on the Thursday night live stream. And that way when people go out, we can catch more fish. Trying to create a community of people sharing and just helping each other out. So we got Mike down there. I'm going to go ahead and bring him in, and we will get on with the show. So bring him in here.
How's it going, man?
McClelland, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing good, doing good. I guess I'm a little out of center here. Get settled in.
Yeah, sure. Sound sounds fine.
Good deal, good deal. We got a little behind today. My phone crashed. You know how it is when technology crashes. My phone crashed about midway through the day. Had to get a new phone, get it all set up and linked up. So a little behind schedule, but we're here, man. We made it. Yeah,
no worries, dude. Yeah, my phone's like, I got an iPhone 6. It's an older one, and I have to push the cord in there and move it every which way but loose to get it to charge. And I'm just buying time. I know I'm going to have to replace it here before too long.
I'm still one of those old Droid users, so everybody laughs at me and my Droid, but it's one of those that's pretty much indestructible, but I finally figured out a way to destroy the one I had. So back to a new one.
Yep. Well, they don't last forever.
No, for sure.
So first question I got for you. This is kind of funny. This is relevant. I wrote a few questions out earlier, but what is a day in the life of Mike McClelland like, besides today?
Besides today, I mean, a day in the life of me is, dude, I have to admit, I have lived my dream now for 20 plus years. I mean, fishing the, formerly the Elite Series, now the Bass Pro Tour, the Major League Fishing Pro Circuit. I mean, it's all about doing what I love to do. And I mean, I was never one of those people that was going to make it sitting behind a desk in an office. I mean, prior to, fishing, I painted, I did a lot of things in the outdoors. And it's just one of those deals that fishing is everything, when it comes to my livelihood. Family's super, super important. Couldn't do it without my wife. And that's what a lot of people don't understand is, they think everything we do is 100% wrapped around putting the boat on the water and going fishing every day. And there's so much more to it. I mean, sponsor obligation, bait development. I'm sitting here looking at prototypes that we've worked on through the winter that we've got coming out. There's so many more things to being a professional angler than anybody gathers. It's unreal.
Yep. Yeah, I understand totally. It's like you said, everybody thinks you just go fishing all day long and that's it. But it's not like that.
It really isn't as bad as I hate to say it, man. I mean, I have been back in the Table Rock Lake area now for 4 or 5 days, and after being on the road to a couple of events, I fished Smith Lake and then straight from Smith Lake to Rayburn. Didn't have 2 very good events, but I've sat here and looked at Table Rock off my back deck. I'm looking out my back window. You're probably wondering what I'm looking at. I'm looking out the back window at the lake right now, and it's like I haven't even been on Table Rock in a month and a half. And I know that they are absolutely chomping out there. I mean, the few reports I've heard and just seeing the conditions, a little bit of colored water coming down Long Creek, it just looks right. And I mean, I'm doing everything I can to get everything squared away here at the house to get back out there on the water.
Jeez, man, that's got to be tough to sit there and see it and not be able to taste it.
Yeah, you do have things you gotta stay up on. We had some family in this weekend. Like I said, family is super, super important. You can't do this without a good family support mechanism. And my mother-in-law and father-in-law were in the area this weekend. We spent some time with them and got caught up on the chores around the house that needed to be done. Washed the stink off the truck and the boat and the RV from the Texas trip. I mean, it was covered with pollen and road grime. You know how those Texas roads are. So it kind of feels nice to be back here in the Ozarks.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. When we go to Table Rock, we always stay down there in the Mill Creek area. And I think that the town of Lampe, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you go right through Lampe and then you turn by Hay Bob's. I think it's a little gas station there on the corner. And then we're down there. Beautiful lake, man. I don't get there enough. It's about 5-hour drive for me. I live in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, so it's a haul. Most of the fishing I do is over in southern Illinois, so we got a lot of smaller lakes over there.
Well, and I heard a little bit of your prelude to me getting on the show, and it's been quite a few years, but I came to what was it called, the hunting and fishing days in southern Illinois or something they used to do. I used to come over and be a part of that deal. That I've heard about, a lot of those lakes that you're talking about, Lake of Egypt, and I forget all the different ones over there now. Rick Cheatham, I know Rick Cheatham pretty well, and I think he's from over in that area. And I've heard him talk about one of those lakes over the years, and it's as unfortunate as it is. I don't guess I've ever fished those lakes. I've been all around them and heard about them, but I've never had the opportunity to fish them. I heard you say they're already spawning over there on a couple of those lakes, or is that the heated lake?
Well, that's the heated lake. That's the heated lake. So it's a few degrees ahead of the other lakes, even though they shut a lot of the power production down on that lake this year. And it's the first time in recent history that it actually froze up. All our lakes obviously were froze up around here for about 3 weeks, but somebody said they caught a fish off of a bed already. So,
and that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, based on what I've learned in the last, 20 plus years being out here on the road fishing, tournament after tournament, it seems like around the spawn, I really believe that we as anglers have missed a lot of early spawning fish. We've probably caught those fish, but we weren't up there looking for them thinking that they should be spawning yet. I just have seen too many situations where it's been cold and then you get a strong warming trend right before a full moon, kind of like what's happened here, in the last week. And fish will spawn. I don't know how successful they are, but I think fish will spawn in a lot colder water than we realize that they spawn in sometimes.
Yeah, especially like the smallmouth. Don't they typically spawn quite a bit before the largemouth? Do you find that on Table Rock, or?
You hear mixed stories about that. A lot of people believe there is a group of smallmouth that spawn early, but I've heard a lot of guys that truly believe there are a lot of smallmouth that spawn, throughout and during, the largemouth and spotted bass spawn. So I don't know that you can gauge that 100%. And I guess that's exactly why we have, the meanmouth that we have here in Table Rock. It's a cross between a smallmouth and a spotted bass. And it's one of those situations that, I mean, God has a plan for this whole world and creation. And I guess whatever's supposed to work out works out. And I don't know that we've really figured it out to a T because, you know, just from my experiences in Florida, I mean, those fish typically start spawning as soon as it cools off in the fall. I mean, that's what triggers them to start spawning. And they'll spawn, from what I gather, from, you know, late October, November, all the way through, you know, the spring. So I think everything cycles the way, you know, Mother Nature's intends for it to cycle. And I think a lot of times we as anglers, we try to outguess what's really going on.
Well, that's the truth. Mother Nature's been doing this forever, and she just kind of, you know, so many times I've said, you know, you go out and you try to catch fish and the bite's really tough, and you're like, why are the bass not reading the magazines? I need to take, you know, like 1,000 copies of a fishing magazine and wrap them in plastic and sprinkle them, sink them on center blocks all around the lake, because, you know, they're just being fish. They do whatever they want. You know, they don't have any social media. They don't have any magazines to read. They're just being fish. They're feeding, reproducing, and surviving, and that's just what they do. And we're out there chasing them around like crazy men.
Yeah, exactly.
And women.
That's one of the things that has really opened my eyes up. Having the opportunity to move back up here on Table Rock Lake, you know, it was a lake that I kind of cut my teeth on fishing, living here in the Ozarks. You know, whether I was living in Northwest Arkansas or now that we're back here in Blue Eye, Missouri on Table Rock, I really haven't had the opportunity to spend a lot of time fishing any one lake due to our tournament schedule. But last year during the COVID shutdown, and we were affected by it just like everyone else, I mean, I had a lot of time on my hands, and I spent more time on Table Rock, you know, last March through, well, I guess it was March through basically June. And it really opened my eyes up to how much I thought I knew about the lake and how much the fish have either changed or I learned things about them that I just didn't realize. I mean, I caught fish pre-spawn, through the spawn, after the spawn, in 18 to 25 foot of water, where in years past, I would have been pushing toward the bank and fishing a lot shallower depths. But with the new technology we have, the Garmin Live Scope, I mean, it opened your eyes up to so much more than you were ever able to see, that it's just really opened my eyes up to the fact that there are fish living in places that we don't think they're living at a lot of times of the year. I mean, there's always some fish shallow, but what's incredible about a lake like Table Rock is how many fish, I think they live deep, they feed deep until Mother Nature calls them to the bank to spawn. It's like they go up there, they spawn, and it isn't much time at all, and they're right back out there where you were catching them prior to the spawn. So it was pretty eye-opening for me last year to spend the time I did here on Table Rock.
So, okay, so talking a little bit more about the Garmin Live Scope. You know, that forward-facing sonar is just really a big buzz the last couple of years, and you know, it seems like more and more people are getting the Live Scope. What differences have you seen the fish doing? I mean, has there been a lot of things that have really been eye-opening? I know you just kind of touched on some of it, but are you seeing things going on that you're like, wow, I had no idea that was really happening?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for so many years, I love to catch them on a jerk bait and a swim bait early in the spring. And for so many years in my mind, I envisioned it different than I think what Live Scope has opened my eyes to that is going on. I mean, for many, many years, those points that I used to run with a jerk bait or a crankbait or a swim bait, in my mind, I always kind of figured those fish were kind of positioned fairly close to the bottom, you know, close to the drop. I like to fish points that have a good deep water drop on them. And I just, in my mind, I had them pictured up there sitting on that break fairly close to the bottom, and they're coming up and eating that jerk bait. But through the last couple of years of using Live Scope, and actually when I really first, my eyes were open to it, was here on Table Rock in 2017. We had a open event here, which I ended up winning. And all but 2 of the bass I weighed during that event, I caught using Panoptics, not the current Live Scope, but the original version of Panoptics, Garmin Panoptics. And I was catching fish that were suspended out over 60 and 80 foot of water pre-spawn. This is when the water temperature's in the lower to mid 50s. They're suspended out over that deep of water, either under bait balls. So they're just out there in open water, suspended under bait balls, or they would be suspended in the very tops of the tallest submerged timber. Some of the fish I would catch might be suspended in a treetop that was 10 or 15 feet below the surface, but I literally saw fish come from 30 feet out of a treetop up to 10 or 12 feet to get my bait. So it really has opened my eyes up to the fact that when you pull up on a point now with live scope, if you're not seeing fish out there in the water column or high on the water column, there's a good chance they're not there. You know, we used to just have that milk run of points or, you know, whatever it was, channel turns or, you know, timber treetops, things like that, that we would just kind of make a milk run and fish, and eventually you ran into them. And now with live scope, you pull up there, drop the trolling motor, make a few throws at some key spots, and if you don't see, you know, any fish, got something that popped up on my screen here. I'm trying to get it off. But if you don't see any fish on live scope, I mean, they're just probably not there. And it's really opened my eyes up to how much time we as anglers have wasted fishing places that they're just not at that particular time.
That's very interesting. So you typically side scan in an area first, and then if you see some fish, you're going to drop your live scope down or your trolling motor down.
Yeah, you know, that's definitely a big part of it. Is you know, using your 2D or your side view, clear view, you know, to take, you know, a visual look at the area. Is there a lot of bait in this area? You know, that's probably the biggest key this time of year for me, is getting in an area that you're seeing a lot of bait high in the water column. The thing about it is, if you're going over bait that is in that 10 to 12 foot zone, or maybe even higher in the water column, you may get a glimpse of the bait on your 2D sonar or your side view, but you're very often not seeing the fish because you're spooking them with the big motor. And until you drop the trolling motor and start milling around a little bit with your live scope, you really don't know what's there. I mean, years back before Panoptics and live scope, I can remember, you know, catching fish out over deep timber and stuff. And occasionally, you know, you would see a fish on your 2D sonar under the trolling motor, you know, 8 or 10 foot down. And you just kind of always thought, you know, well, that fish came up and fed on something, or he followed my bait to the boat. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, those fish are out there suspended high in the water column, trying to sun. They're trying to warm up, getting ready for the spawn.
Yeah. Okay, check this out. Oh, we got that.
Can you
hear that loop?
Do what?
We got a loop going right now. Okay, we're good now. Sometimes it acts up. But yeah, there's been so many times where I would come through an area and scan it and not really see anything, and then put the trolling motor down, start fishing, and next thing you know, on the 2D, there's fish. You know, after you set down and you're kind of hanging out on the point for maybe 10 minutes, next thing you know, you start seeing these fish, and you're like, where were those fish at a while ago? I just scanned this area. I didn't see anything here, and there they are. So to me, I don't have live scope. I've been in a boat with it several times, but to me, that says that the fish are roaming around a lot more than, you know, I realized they were.
Oh yeah, and that is the other thing that I have learned, is how much they do move around. I mean, there's been days that, you know, you pull up, and especially with schooling fish, you know, you see some schoolers popping, you shut down, you drop your trolling motor, and you're throwing at them. And I mean, you're throwing, you know, 50 yards this way at them, and all of a sudden, you know, you're looking on your live scope and they're not there, and you might pan, you know, 90 degrees before you see that group of fish again. It's really opened my eyes up to the fact of how many fish there are to just catch over open water, but how much those fish move around, and how much we as anglers affect the fish more so than I think I ever realized we did. I've noticed if I'm fishing brush piles, you know, not necessarily just early in the spring, but brush piles that are at a certain depth where maybe you're cranking them or you're catching fish on a spinnerbait over the top of them or something. And I've literally changed baits after I've caught 4 or 5 and done something different, and absolutely spooked the whole school of fish out of a brush pile. I mean, I don't know if it was the sound of the bait, if it was the fact that I had drug a bait through the brush pile instead of over the brush pile, but it really made me open my eyes up to the fact of how much we as anglers affect the fish before we ever have the opportunity to catch them. So it's eye-opening. I mean, it's been very responsible for a lot of tournament wins in the last 3 years, but it was kind of cool this week to see, Ott win a tournament just fishing the bank again. I mean, Ott wasn't utilizing, live scope this week or whatever technology, he might be using. But, I feel like Ott just kind of went back to the good old days of catching them in the bushes and on the bank. And I didn't get to see a lot of the live, but it was kind of cool to see that, okay, a guy can still do well without live scope, but there's certain times that you're going to have forward facing sonar to get it done after what we've learned.
Yeah, that was good. I watched that too. He was just back there in that little creek, chucking that little shallow running crankbait, catching them just like he does. That was good stuff. So what about the live scoping grass? Is that a player in grass? I mean, does it work?
It really does. I'm definitely not going to say I'm an expert on utilizing it in grass because, fishing the lakes that I fish here in the Ozarks, most of the time, we don't have a lot of grass. But from the guys that I talk to that are learning to utilize it in grass, the key is how you use your settings. Like when I fish on the type of lakes that I'm familiar with fishing, most of the time I'm looking 80 to 110 feet out from the boat. And what I'm learning from talking to these guys, when you're fishing, grass or shallower cover, you might want to pull your scale in because it broadens the spectrum it shrinks the spectrum of what you're looking at. So everything, becomes a little bit more exaggerated. And the guys that I've seen it a little bit, but I just don't want to sit here and talk like I really know what I'm talking about. But guys say you can see the fish, especially moving down the edges of the grass. And the thing that's so incredible about it is how many times, you wind a bait over the top of some grass, a jerk bait or something. And as you get it closer to the boat, how often fish are following that bait, that you would never know about without the fact that you're seeing them on live scope chase it back to the boat. Now, do you know if all of them are bass? No, but it's opening your eyes up to the fact that you're triggering reactions from fish. And, when they are bass, it's amazing what you can do to manipulate them into biting just by changing your cadence or doing something different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen, I got that boop going. Just give it a second. It'll settle down. Okay, there we go. It's weird. I don't know why it does that. It does that every once in a while. But I've heard people talking about using, the live scope just basically to find the grass edge. Just so they can work that grass edge and keep their bait, in the strike zone along that grass edge. So we got a couple comments on here. Let me pop some of these up and I can just read them out to you. That way people go back on the playback and they're just listening to it. Jay Beffa Fishing says, he says, after what I seen at Table Rock, they're ready to bust. Said the smallmouth bass were footballs. So it sounds like the fish are definitely fattening up down there.
Oh yeah. I will have to say that the little bit of time that I got to spend on Table Rock before leaving to go south, the fish seem to be as healthy as I've seen them in a number of years. 3 or 4 years ago, we had 2 or 3 winters that it just didn't get cold. And it never forced a lot of the fish to go deep. And basically, I think they just kind of stayed up there on the bank. And I think the crawfish stayed relatively active all through the winter. But I really believe that they picked through the forage, that was there and available. The water didn't get cold enough to really force them to go deep. But this year it got so cold that those fish really grouped up. They went deep. They really got on shad strong. And I mean, from December through I guess it was right before the major cold snap hit. I mean, the fish I was catching were just absolutely tanks. I mean, fat, healthy, clean, no poor looking fish at all. So I really believe, just like we talked earlier, Mother Nature knows what this world needs. And I know as bad as the cold was for everybody, I think it's going to be, you know, an incredible fishing spring. I mean, I know, and I haven't kept in good contact with it, but I mean, they have caught them good here at Table Rock over the past 2 or 3 weeks, you know, once it has warmed up. I just see a guy 62 in the Kings River arm. So, you know, those are the kind of days. I guess the last day I fished here was after the cold snap. Took a good friend of mine from a Toyota dealership, Fayetteville Auto Park, and we probably caught 35 to 40 fishing the White River arm of the lake. Didn't catch a lot of quality, but I mean, a fair number of keepers and just a ton of fish on a rock crawler and a stick bait that day. So there's definitely numbers as well as quality both going on right now.
So what sections of the lake do you fish? Do you try to fish the whole lake, or do you have certain areas that you key in on? I mean, obviously Long Creek is probably one of your areas.
Well, it's funny you asked that question, because last year, even with all of the time that I spent here on the lake, fishing was so good that from, I guess, the time we shut down, or even before the shutdown, when I was getting ready for, you know, hitting the road, clear through Memorial Day, I don't think I ever went above the Kimberling City Bridge, which is really what you would almost consider not even quite mid-lake. So I spent all of my time from Kimberling City to basically the Long Creek Bridge, or just slightly up in Long Creek. You know, if I wanted to go catch some fish on a spinnerbait, fish a little colored water, you know, flip some bushes and things like that back when we had the high water, I would typically go above Long Creek Bridge. But as soon as you get down into this lower end of the lake around the dam and Indian Point and that area between here and Kimberling City, you really had just so many things that you could do. I mean, I caught fish on a swim bait and a jerk bait and a top water and a big swim bait, you know, just so many different things worked that I never felt the need to go anywhere else. I actually spent a little bit of time this fall with my son and the Big Bite SPRO group. We did a little get together and we fished up in the White River arm of the lake, and it kind of opened my eyes up to the fact of how I should have been exploring more of the lake last fall, because I mean, fishing was incredible up there, you know. So in my opinion, there's certain times of the year that there's sections of this lake that it gets tough to catch them in, but I really think Table Rock's about as healthy as it's been in a lot of years, and you can generally figure out how to catch them in about any region of the lake you want to spend your time in right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that, you know, unfortunately around here, all our lakes are really small. They're like 2,000 acres, a lot of them. So we don't really, it's hard. And I've said this before on the stream, it's hard to run a pattern on some of our lakes because you just run out of water. You know, you find something.
Fish
what's
spots.
that? It's spots.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. It's spots. You might find what you think is a pattern. I mean, you can get some general patterns, outside grass line, secondary points. But if you start getting like a real specific secondary point that's maybe got a channel swing up against it with some riprap and grass that stops at 10 foot, you're not going to find that. There's only like 2 of those in the whole lake, you know, where someplace like Table Rock, you know, you've got a lot of room to roam and actually put a pattern together. And I really would like, and someday I hope to move onto a bigger body of water. I live about 2 hours away from Kentucky Lake, and you know, you can do that stuff down there because it's so big. It's the same, you know, it's the same deal. But unfortunately, it's spot fishing, like you said, around here. So I wish I was looking out my window at Table Rock right now.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things I will say about Table Rock, and probably the reason that my career has gone as it has, is typically if we get in a situation on the tour that is a pattern type lake, I generally can really break it down. And I love to fish by the seat of my pants. I mean, I look back at my history here on Table Rock and the success I've had, and generally when I've won a tournament or had a really strong finish in a tournament here at Table Rock, it's not been fishing the same places that I caught fish in practice. It's been establishing a pattern and then running that pattern through a section, or maybe even 2 or 3 sections of the lake. The last 2 tournaments that I've won here at Table Rock, 15 and 17, as far as major events, I mean, would start the morning down here on the lower end of the lake by the dam. And in one of those events, I ended up clear up in the Shell Knob area late in the afternoon, and then might finish the day off back down here at the dam. But essentially I was running a pattern, and you know, I was trying to go from catching smallmouth and spots to going somewhere where I felt like my odds of catching largemouth got better. And that's probably one of the biggest things that you have to learn about table rock is when you fish this lake, you're going to catch, you'll catch mixed bags in certain places in certain regions of the lake. But there's a lot of areas on this lake that, you know, when you go to this area, you're largemouth fishing. You know, when you run way up the creeks, up the James, up the White, you're pretty much, you know, dictating to yourself, you're going largemouth fishing. When you stay down here on the midsection of the lake in the lower end, you definitely open up your opportunities to catch in a mixed bag. And, you know, you spend more time in the creeks in the spring, you're going to catch more largemouth. And as you work your way out to the secondary points in the main lake, you're going to find, you know, a lot more spots in smallmouth. And you even learn to start breaking it down by the type of banks that they're going to relate to. You know, the smallmouth love to get on flat gravel at certain times, you know, up here in the spring. And, you know, the smallmouth and spots will kind of intermix on those, but a lot of times you'll find the spots out deeper and the smallmouth will be shallower, and, you know, various things like that you just kind of learn to work your way through on this lake.
Yeah, those rock transitions are key. I fished a BFL Lake of the Ozarks probably like 2 weeks ago. And no, actually I fished a BFL and a Toyota series, but I was getting ready to talk about the Toyota series. But my second day partner, I was a co-angler. He was from Bull Shows, and Lake of the Ozarks was down. I think it was down like 7 feet below winter pool. So almost record lows. So you can see all the rock transitions. And him being from Bull Shows, he was explaining to me, you know, just how these rock transitions work. And I knew that too, but with it being that low, it became really obvious where the fish were set up. Anytime there was just a little swing, not a channel swing. You know, I always think of a swing as a channel swing, but he was talking about just a little swing in the bank that kind of cut in maybe 4 or 5 feet and then just kind of came back out. Those fish were sitting in that kind of stuff. Or anytime you had some, you know, baseball, softball size rock that kind of turned to maybe some lava rock or, you know, some pea gravel mixed in there, right on those little seams, we would get bit. And when the water's up high, you just see kind of the bank. You don't really see those obvious rock changes. So I learned a lot on that day with fishing with him. And you know, him talking about how they catch them down on Bull Show. So that was pretty fun. Rustin Logan says, is Lake of Egypt a place where swim baits would work? Finally taking the dive into larger swim and glide baits, and would love to catch a decent fish this weekend. What do you think it's too early to fish like the glide baits and stuff? Do you have a certain water temperature you look for that kind of stuff?
You know, the biggest thing that I have seen is typically when you get fish into that phase where they're really sunning or starting to spawn is when those bigger swim baits start to come into play. I truly think that they are probably better, you know, during and in the post spawn period. But anytime you take the opportunity to throw one of those big swim baits, you just have to understand it's one of those baits you have to commit to if that's truly what you want to do and go catch, you know, a better quality fish. It's one of those deals that you have to commit to throwing that bait. It's not something you can pick up and throw 3 or 4 casts and lay it back down and go back to something else. And, you know, even here on Table Rock, I mean, and Lake of the Ozarks, and I would have to believe Lake of Egypt, is the water clarity decent? I mean, do you have 1.5 feet, 2 foot of visibility, or is it?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I think anytime you get yourself in a position where you've got 1.5 feet, 2 foot of visibility, you know, a big swim bait could be a player. I actually thought this week at Rayburn, or last week at Rayburn, it was going to be a player as the week progressed. And the second day of my group that I fished, I mean, 10 minutes into the morning, I catch almost a 3-pounder on a, you know, big 7-inch swim bait. And I think, man, this day is going to turn into something special. And I think the water clarity where I was at was maybe just a little too dirty. I mean, I could literally, it was real milky. It wasn't necessarily that it was muddy, but it just wasn't a visible clean that I think those fish could see that bait from far enough away. But big swim baits are so much fun to catch them on, because I mean, those same fish that will bite a spinnerbait or something else and they just kind of load up on it, when they decide to eat a big swim bait, it is the most ferocious bite you'll ever have in your life. I mean, it's just like, it's bone jarring. I mean, when they bite that big swim bait, you know something just happened, and they bite that bait with such a different enthusiasm than they bite so many other baits. It's pretty unreal.
Yeah. Russ, if I was going over to Egypt, I would stick with some moving baits right now. Just your power fishing stuff, chatterbait, shallow running crankbait, spinnerbait, that kind of stuff. And then if I ran across any kind of hard cover, I would definitely have a jig or your favorite soft plastics, Texas rig, and just kind of pick it apart. And another thing right now that's going on, at least in my part of the country, is the fish have been in just little groups. So you'll fish a lot of dead water and, you won't get bit. So having said that, if you get a bite or two, you might want to definitely pick that thing apart, slow down with your jig or soft plastics, and just milk it for all it's worth, because that's going to change as these fish start moving into the later pre-spawn and right into spawn. You're going to see a lot more fish up shallow, and then they kind of spread out. So you'll be able to kind of go in one side of a cove, maybe start in the back, just go in and catch fish kind of randomly throughout that cove. But as of like last week, it may have changed, but as of last week and the month or so prior, it's been about just finding a little group of fish and then just fishing a lot of dead water and then trying to find some more fish. So I would definitely just put something, you got confidence in your hand, try to cover some water, and there you go, man. There you go. That's a good one.
One thing that I have sat here and thought about with you talking about that is when you look at, for those of you that have watched coverage of Major League Fishing, for so many years, jerkbaits were, always kind of considered that, early pre-spawn bait, and then everybody kind of put them away. But and I hate to bring it up again, but with live scope and with the technology that we have got now, it has gotten to the point where a jerkbait is a bait that a lot of guys catch fish on throughout the course of the year. And all of the live tournament coverage has kind of brought that to the attention of everybody. I mean, the thing about it is, and just, with SPRO, we've got 4 or 5 different jerkbait models. You've got the 85, which is a deeper spoonbill type bait. You've got the 95, which is a smaller 2-hook bait. We're working on a new 110+1. Going to be a deeper diving. Can't get that in the screen.
I like that, man. I like that a lot.
To take to get your 110s to a little better depth. Then the 115. To me, a lake like Lake of Egypt sets up perfectly for a SPRO McStick 115. It's a shallower, floating, more erratic jerkbait. And I mean, based on what you're telling me, you typically are fishing relatively shallow water, probably less than 8 or 10 foot. Is that kind of the way I'm gathering what you're telling me here, Gabe?
Right now, yeah. There are times in the fall where it's typically a shad thing. Those fish just use the shad for cover. But yeah, right now for the next probably couple months, I would say you're definitely going to be keying in that 10 foot of water or less.
And for those of you that have, from back in the olden days of the bango lures and the floating rising jerk baits, that's more like what the McStick 115 is. And, for fishing like what you're talking about, especially this time of year when those fish start going into those pockets and scattering out, it's a bait that you can fish relatively shallow, cover a lot of water, but you can, fish it in a variety of manners and, get some fish to bite that maybe you're not generally they're not getting pressured as much by, as they see other baits, chatter baits and jigs and all these various things.
That floating stick bait, man, is deadly. I've gotten away from those. When I was a kid, I used to fish that Rapala, that were floating Rapala, gold side, blackback, just a floating minnow all the time. And I caught a ton of fish on that. And it comes up every once in a while, when I'm talking to somebody, why don't I throw a floating stick bait anymore? So that 115 is a floating model of the.
It's a floating model, so it's a little bit bigger than the 110. It's 115, and It's got a shallower bill on it, so it's not going to dive, 6 to 9 foot deep like the 110. But, it's more of a bait that you can throw. In fact, I caught fish on it at Rayburn just this past week. Didn't get on them good enough to realize they were catching them like they did on a jerk bait. But, I definitely caught some fish and kind of had a glimmer of hope there with the 115 down there at Rayburn, fishing it over the top of grass.
Now, is that a bait, that 115, is that something that you can take your pliers to and bend that line tie down or the pull point down and get that?
You can play with it. You can play with it a little bit. In fact, when we started developing the bait, one of the prototypes that we had was an incredible weight bait. And I tried to talk them into, let's just build this one as a weight bait. And they're like, no, that's not what we're after right now, and it's one that we still, maybe have on the back burner. SPRO's got such a huge, following and such a great pro staff that they're developing and putting new baits out so often and so many good quality baits now that it's pretty tough to keep up. You talked about what I do as an angler. I mean, all winter long we were working on prototype baits, and I mean, you can see my little box of prototypes here. We've got a new RKCrawler 55 suspending version that we're going to be coming out with, and you guys look at these colors and you think, what's up with the colors? It's so you can see them good in clear water when you're throwing them to get an idea of if they're doing the right thing. But this is the new 55 suspending model. And then for those of you that have thrown the new 50, we have an XD version of the 50 coming out. And it's basically, a size 50 that's going to get down there into that, 10 to 12 foot range rather than the original 50 that'll only go, 8 foot deep. And so it's been pretty exciting to work with the prototype baits over the winter. And I think we got some really cool stuff coming this next spring.
Okay, so back to that deep dive and jerk bait. That one caught my eye. Any idea, is that out yet, or when is that going to be coming out?
It is not out yet. I mean, I'm hoping this is a bait that we release somewhere around the ICAST period. So it's probably going to be one of those baits that, is available next fall, as well as the other baits I talked about. They're going to be probably, an ICAST type release, and then hopefully they'll be available for fall consumers is what I'm kind of shooting for. It's pretty crazy how long it takes to develop a bait from start to finish and go from the prototype state to tweaking the bait to getting it to the production phase. I mean, sometimes it can be an 18 months to 2 year process. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So walk us through that slightly. So you come up with an ideal of a bait that you want, and you have some characteristics that you want the bait to do, and then you draw that up. You send it to a guy who knows a guy, and they make a mold. How's that all go down?
As crazy as it sounds, I had a little bit of I actually thought I wanted to be an architect when I was in school. I mean, when I was in high school, I was taking architecture classes like 2 or 3 hours in the day, so I had a little bit of drawing experience. And growing up here on Table Rock, I mean, it's simply the fact I threw a wiggle wart for many, many years. And so many companies tried to come along and copy a wiggle wart or knock a wiggle wart off. It was a good bait. It does a lot of cool things. But when SPRO actually gave me the opportunity to work on a crankbait for them, it's like, guys, I don't want to knock the baits I used to throw off. I want to make them do different things, just like what you just said. So, I took a similar body shape. I always wanted a wiggle wart that was bigger than it was, but not as big as the mag. And I wanted a bait that still hunted, but was a little bit more true to tune than what you could do from the old baits. And rather than, knocking something off, I mean, we started from complete scratch. And I mean, if you knew the painstaking phases, I mean, we probably went through 3 or 4 different prototypes, different bill angles and different bill shapes before we finally arrived at this one being the one that it is. And I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there throwing, the original RK55. And I mean, we were pretty fortunate that we hit a home run. I mean, it was probably the craziest thing was I was going to be happy with this bait when we went from the prototype state if it would dive, 9 to 11 feet deep. And for those of you that have thrown it on, the lighter lines, I mean, I throw it on Sunline FC crank. If I throw it on 10-pound test, I can get this bait 13 to 14 feet deep. So I'm able to get a bait down there to fish that we were never able to reach with a crankbait that does what the RKCrawler does. So, it was a cool experience, and to see it take off and just to get all the feedback I get from fans, that hit me up on Facebook and Instagram and everything. It's been pretty incredible I wished I could say I've won the number of tournaments on the RKCrawler as I've seen people win. I mean, I've had successes on it, but it's won a lot of tournaments out there, and it's exciting to hear those feedback from fans out there.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. I throw that thing a lot. Actually, I just started throwing it a couple years ago, and I've caught fish in 41-degree water was the coldest I caught fish, and actually on Lake Egypt, way back in some of those creeks, just crawling it like the name says.
And that's going to be the cool thing about the suspending version. When you start talking about those colder water temperatures, I mean, the original 55, it's relatively buoyant. When it deflects, it's buoyant, so it will jump and hunt. But the new suspending model is going to be one of those baits that you can get out there, you can wind it down to a depth, and you can stop it. And it's not that it's going to just completely suspend. I mean, it's going to have just a slight slow rise to it, but you'll be able to maintain depth better with it. You'll be able to slow it down. And for fishing those colder water situations, it's going to be pretty incredible.
It's going to get down to the same depths as the original?
Oh, yeah. Okay. It'll probably get deeper just due to the fact that when you stop it, it's not going to have that tendency to rise. So you'll be able to it's one of those deals you almost reload. You make a long cast, you wind it down there, you get it to the bottom, and, you kind of get everything set up right, and you can sweep it, and it's like you can get it to gain just a little bit more depth anytime you're throwing a bait that's somewhat neutral buoyant. So it's probably going to be pretty crazy how deep this bait might actually get for anglers.
Well, that's cool. So this is my favorite color right here. I love this one. And I believe that's a spring crawl. Yeah, that one this is the one I always start out with, regardless of what the watercolor is, but I've caught more fish on this than I have any of the other ones. What's some of your top 3 favorite colors or whatever down there in Rock or Lake Ozarks?
We're pushing, I think, over 20 colors now. We just keep getting new additions, and we keep tweaking colors. And like this one right here I've got, Red Craw, is probably day in, day out for early spring, a color that I turn to a lot now. But day in, day out, throughout the course of time, if you gave me one color, it would probably be Phantom Green. And the reason for it is it's somewhat translucent, but it's kind of got that opaque cream belly on it. So it's one of those baits that, I feel like whether the water's got a little bit of stain to it or if it's super, super clear, it's a bait that I can always put on and know if I'm around them, I'm going to get a few bites. Now, after I get a few bites on that bait, maybe I'll tweak it a little bit. Yeah, Phantom Green right there. I didn't get all my baits in order before I jumped on here, but Phantom Green is by far day in, day out the bait that I go to all the time. The little bit of orange on the tail, the back is somewhat translucent, but that belly is relatively opaque.
Yeah, you get that flash,
Yeah. For years, I've never understood, you have so many different crawfish imitating baits. And dude, if you pick a crawfish up, most all crawfish, unless they're just hanging out in the mud, their bellies are relatively creamy or white colored, or maybe slightly off colored brown. And you just don't see a lot of crawfish color imitating baits that have a cream or white colored belly on them. And like you said, it's one of those baits that if a fish is feeding on shad, he's really prone to eat that bait too because of that flash that you get off the belly.
Yep, it just shows up. Here, this one right here is a killer too in the SPRO lineup.
Yeah, that is a color from the Little John series that we have, and that's another thing that's kind of unique about the SPRO pro staff and pros is the fact that we all kind of have our unique colors, and our unique patterns. I mean, John Cruz has done a phenomenal job with the Little John series. you know, it seems like you guys from farther east throw that Little John series a lot more than we do here at Table Rock. And I think it's just that upbringing. You know, we were always used to throwing the old Model A bombers and the variety of different baits that we threw. We always threw a wider, fatter body bait, where it seems like the farther east you go, you get a lot more into that flat-sided bait.
That's a Kentucky Lake deal right there. That's a real good bait right now on Kentucky Lake.
Yeah. Kentucky Lake, Lake Murray. I mean, those lakes, the farther east you go, the red clay lakes, it seems like, is where those baits really, really start coming into play.
It's got that kind of muted, like tungsten, maybe like a rubber coated ball or something in there, maybe.
It's got a soft tungsten ball in it, is what it has in it. And that's what gives it that, you know, soft, deep, just one knock sound is what you get out of it. You know, and that's the other thing about the RKCrawler is the unique sound it has. You know, there's a lot of crankbaits. You know, I don't know that you would necessarily just say it's a one knock, but it isn't an extremely loud crankbait. I mean, it's a relatively toned down, you know, knock and noise that the RKCrawler has as a whole.
It has its own little sound to it, which is, you know, makes it a little bit different. So back to the McStick, do you have a couple favorite colors? Mine right here, I caught a lot of fish this year on this. This one's killer, dude.
Yeah, that is by far, Blue Bandit is probably the #1 go-to day in, day out, just like the Phantom Green. But when you start talking colors, the one thing that I have really noticed over the last 2 or 3 years is, man, I really think these fish get conditioned to seeing the same baits. And I think that was one reason that Blue Bandit was so phenomenal when it first hit, was it was a custom painted color from kind of here in the Ozarks that I got permission from the guy that painted it for me to you know, make a color similar. And for the first 4 or 5 years, I mean, I very seldomly ever threw anything but that. But it got to be, every time you pulled up to a tournament, everybody that was throwing a jerkbait had one of those laying on the deck too. And over the past 2 or 3 years, it's like every time we come out with new colors. I mean, last year when I got to spend so much time here on Table Rock fishing, the new colors were the ones that just really dominated for me. The PM Twilight, the Ghost Magic Purple, the you know, the newer of the colors, the MCIU. I mean, these were the colors that predominantly I caught them on last spring here on Table Rock, and I think it was simply fish weren't used to seeing them. And honest to goodness, I mean, this color right here was one I struggled with. I mean, I threw all the new colors day in, day out for about a week, and my son's like, which one do you like the best? And I'm like, man, I think I like, you know, the MCIU, and I like this one. He's like, have you thrown the PM Twilight? And I'm like, no, man, there's just something about that bait that's just crazy. And he's like, Dad, you got to throw it. And I mean, I put this bait on, and I don't think I took it off for a month. I mean, it was just like everywhere I went, they ate it. And to me, I kind of try to go with the new colors, but every now and then, just like this past week at Rayburn, I pulled Blue Bandit out because it looked right in the water. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it had that milky, just off green color. And to me, Blue Bandit was that color that just really set itself off in that particular color water. You know, when you start talking watercolor, though, you know, there's so many times you get into a little bit of off color, and I think that bait doesn't maybe look exactly like it. But this Norman Flake is a color that is great when you get into a little bit of off colored water. It's kind of got that hazy purple back and just a nice creamy side, and then a little bit of red or orange on the belly that sets it off in you know, dirtier water. And again, we've got so many colors now that I look here in this box and I'm like, man, I haven't thrown that color for a year. And it's just simply because we've got so many great colors to choose from now.
That PM Twilight, so that's kind of a bone with some, is that yellow or orange on it?
The belly is more orange.
Okay.
And the back up here is more yellow. It's got a little bit of purple and black here on the head. And then it's got kind of a white or almost a white chartreuse flash tail here. So yeah, it's really unique in the water. And it's kind of like this bait here too. It's almost like when you jerk the bait, it's kind of like the bait does something crazy in the water because you've got those 3 different colors, and it almost looks like a school of bait rather than a single bait. When you make it, when you hit it hard and it flashes one way, it's like you get kind of a mixture of colors going off in different directions. So, but no, we're going to continue to hit every year with some new colors and keep adding to it. I mean, I guess the whole thing about it is there's a lot of colors that'll catch fish, but I think the biggest thing about color is, every angler's got his favorite colors, and you just got to keep coming out with them until you catch them.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what keeps the fish biting.
Yeah.
There's enough colors out there that not everybody's, I mean, people are throwing a lot of the same colors, but there's enough out there that you could switch them up, and maybe the fish that got educated on your lake will see that color. Well, I mean, the Pro Blue, that's that jerkbait, that color's a standby, just like a French pearl or something white with an orange belly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that Blue Bandit, dude, you hit it good with that one.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look at the array of different colors that I've got in my McStick box, I mean, I've got the most translucent of translucent to the good old clown or Delta Chrome, I think this is actually called, and it's just a variety of different colors, and it just the watercolor and a lot of different things are going to dictate what I throw. But I mean, typically I kind of always reach for the newest colors when the season starts is kind of where it goes.
So Jay Beff has got a question on there. He says, Mike, when your fish get a little more active, do you up your line size?
Typically in the spring, when I first start throwing a jerkbait, when the water temperatures are in the mid to upper 40s, I generally am always throwing 10. But as the water warms and the fish do get more aggressive, they get a little hotter, they get more active. A lot of times with the Sunline FC crank, I'm able to go to 12 or 14. In fact, last week at Rayburn, I was throwing a McStick 115 on 16-pound Sunline FC crank. So, yeah, I change my line size a lot, and it's not always just because of the mood of the fish, but a lot of times it's the depth that I want my jerkbait to get to, or crankbait, either one. I'm gonna throw FC crank on my jerkbaits and crankbaits, and it allows me to control the depth. I mean, if I want to get maximum depth out of a RKCrawler or out of a McStick 110, I'm going to go to 8 pound. If I don't feel like I need to get that deep and the fish have gotten more aggressive or they've gotten shallower, it doesn't bother me a bit to step it up to 12 or 14, and every now and then even 16. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to upsize as the season progresses.
Stephanie wants to know, how far will a fish move to bite a jerkbait out of suspended water, from what you have seen?
From what I've seen, and Table Rock is relatively clear, but I mean, from what I've seen on live scope, I have literally watched fish come from treetops 35 to 40 feet deep up to 8-10 foot deep to get a jerkbait or a swim bait. So it's incredible how far away those fish can see the bait. And the thing that I've learned from watching live scope is, we've all been there. Those bites you get when you're fishing a bait along and they just nipping at it, and you keep trying to do something different with it and they just keep slapping at it. Those are typically the fish that you're at the same depth level they're at. I mean, when you throw out there at a school of fish that's setting 8 or 10 feet deep and you jerk that bait down to them, those are the ones that nip and slash at it. When one of those fish comes from a long ways away, those are those bites that we all as anglers say, man, that one crushed it, because those are the ones that come at it full force. And generally, when you're getting bites like that, you've got to understand in your mind pretty quick, those fish are coming from farther to get that bait. And it may be that you need to slow your bait down a little bit. Sometimes you need to speed it up. It's just figuring out what cadence you were using when you were getting the hardest bite you're getting, because those to me are the easiest fish to catch. The ones that come from the farthest away are going to commit and get the bait much better than the ones you're throwing right at.
That makes sense. Phil has a question here, and I guess what he's saying is, do you ever, when you're fishing shallow, would you ever use a deeper bill jerkbait, to kind of dig in maybe a little bit?
Early on in my career, that was back when the old spoonbill rogues and things like that were really all we had. The spoonbill rogue, the spoonbill rebel, and you know, I do remember times when, man, it seemed like you would catch a lot of fish dredging that bait, you know, down there in the bottom, you know, getting it down and actually, you know, pulling it and grinding the bottom a little bit and then letting it float up a little bit. And I truly believe, you know, that's the main reason for the addition of the new 110 plus is it's going to be that bait that you can get down there a little bit deeper and, you know, grind it around a little bit more. Or if you're just needing to get deeper when you're fishing for suspended fish that aren't as aggressive, yeah, that opportunity's there. We actually, you know, I said we're working on the 110 plus one, and we've actually got a 110 plus two that we're working.
Next question. That was my next question.
Yeah. So as you can see, there's a huge difference in the two bills on the plus one and the plus two. So, you know, it's definitely been a little longer process on those baits, just getting them right, getting them to set right in the water, making sure that the buoyancy factor of them's right. But I think we're getting pretty close. Man,
that's good timing. It's good timing for those deeper diving jerk baits. For the same reasons you mentioned earlier with the live, everybody's seeing the fishermen. They fish jerk baits all year long, and jerk baits have really, again, there's a buzz going on a little bit more than normal about them.
Oh, there is. And, you know, there's a lot of good jerk baits on the market. I mean, I actually can admit and be truthful with you. I don't carry anything but SPROs in my boat. And it's one of those situations that I've really put the pressure on them, you know, now that we're starting to see these different versions come into play of how important it is for us to add, you know, deeper baits to the lineup, possibly even some shallower baits as time goes on. And, you know, there's a lot of effective baits on the market today, and it's one of those situations that we're going to have to stay ahead of the curve for sure.
Riverbend Bassin has, do you guys store your soft plastics in boxes or keep them in bags? I personally keep them in the bags. I used to put them in boxes, but it seems like they'll get a little bit stiffer over time. They kind of have a tendency to dry out. And I mean, that's what do you do?
I agree with that, except for practice situations. I've got, just to kind of limit what I carry in the boat in practice, I've got boxes of, you know, just a few of a lot of different baits. You know, like I may have a box of big bite college craws mixed in with, you know, some twin tails and various things like that, where in practice I can just, you know, not be carrying 30 different bags of stuff to try. But then when I get to a tournament situation, I like to keep my baits in the bags. I do like to add some scent to, you know, my baits in the bags. So it gets really messy trying to add scent in boxes. So bags are definitely the way I go for my tournament baits.
Yeah. J. Beffa Fishing says, tell us about the stone cold color. Rumor is you and Justin developed that color.
I can't say that we did. It was actually a Pittman Creek exclusive. Pittman Creek is a distributor that SPRO basically gives any dealer out there the opportunity to develop their own colors, but they have to order a certain number of them. Well, Pittman Creek, due to the fact that they're a large distributor, every year they'll come up with 2 or 3 colors and make them exclusive colors to Pittman Creek. And other companies have done it as well. I mean, in years past, Bass Pro Shop had some exclusive RKCrawler colors and various things. But the Stone Cold color, as bad as I hate to admit this, I did not know it existed until last fall. I was deer hunting over around Forsyth, Missouri, at a little place that we hunt on. And I went in an archery shop to pick up, I don't remember what I was after, an umbrella, I think, because it was going to rain that week of deer season. And I walk in and there's these crankbaits in SPRO packages sitting there in a color I've never seen. And I picked them up and I looked up at the guy at the counter and I'm like, where did you get these? You have these custom painted? And he's like, no, that's a Pittman Creek exclusive. So I actually had to call Pittman Creek and order some directly from them because I couldn't get my hands on them because they were sold out at SPRO. So, you know, it's an awesome color. It's been kind of the hot color this past year. And, you know, even though you asked me earlier about my colors, I mean, it does seem like, again, anytime you get some of those new colors that hit, people just go crazy about them. And for some reason, I think that fish go crazy about them as well.
Vasca 1960 says the 50, 55, 110, and 115. These are links in millimeters. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, and they're always the body of the bait. So like on the original 55, it has nothing to do with the bill. It's the body of the bait itself. So you're talking about from the nose of the bait to the tail of the bait, not the nose of the bill. So it's 55 millimeters from, you know, the bait itself, and that's the way all the jerk baits. That's just kind of the way all of the I guess you would say the Japanese lure makers have kind of always gone with their bait sizing over the years.
Mm-hmm. Now, Tad Gunnett had sent me a question. He wasn't able to get on the stream. He's got to work tonight, but he wanted to know, do you change out hooks on the McStick? And if so, what size do you go to and brands do you use?
Generally, the only reason I change hooks out on McSticks is after I've caught enough fish on them and the originals get bent out. And, you know, because it's going to happen over time. I mean, when you're catching a lot of fish on a jerkbait, I mean, these are light wire, super sharp hooks, and they're number 5s originally on the bait from the factory. As you can see on this one, every now and then I'll put a feathered Gamakatsu treble on the back just to give it a little bit more flash. But the biggest thing that I utilize hook changing for is to add weight to the bait. I mean, I don't know if you can specifically see it, but this bait at the bottom of the screen has original number 5s on it, and the bait at the top of the screen, I have a number 4 2X strong on the front right here, and it looks like the rest of them are number 5s, but I do that to adjust the weight of the bait. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, if I'm at Toledo Bend and I know I'm going to catch a bunch of 5-pounders, every now and then I'll go to a 2X strong or the next size up just to give myself a little bit more meat in my hook if I know I'm going to be catching some giants. So I don't change from Gamakatsus. I feel like, you know, whether it's the original round bend Gamakatsus or if it's the G Finesse Aaron Martin, you know, Gamakatsu hooks, in my opinion, they make the best treble hooks across the brand. And I don't carry anything but Gamakatsu hooks. You can see on this bait, I've actually, do you see the extra split ring hanging right here off of the back of the front hook?
Yep, sure do.
I add split rings as well if I need just a little bit more weight. This bait's got a number 4 on the front with number 5s on the back. And then the split ring was, you know, a particular day, the water temperature was probably, you know, a degree colder or warmer, and I needed a little bit different, you know, slow rise or fall out of the bait, so I add a split ring to it to get that extra rise or fall out of the bait.
Yeah, I've done the same thing. This is one I just showed you earlier, but I've upsized this front hook and put a split ring on there because it was rising. Several of the McSticks that I have, they have a tendency to just rise slightly, but it's not in the. It was just probably just the day I was fishing them or the couple of days I was fishing them. So just adding a split ring and a bigger hook. You know, this is a little bit heavier hook because I like. Do you think it makes a difference if they're nose down or if they're horizontal?
I definitely always weight the bait in the front first because I do want that bait to set nose down in the water column. I feel like a fish generally eats the bait from the head more often when it's setting nose down. And I also feel like you get a little bit increased depth. You know, when you pull that bait down, if it's setting level and you pull it again, it's got to turn itself down. Whereas if you stop the bait and it stops here and you pull it again, it's going to have a tendency to go a little bit deeper, a little bit quicker. So I definitely agree. I want my bait to set nose down. And most of the baits are pretty well designed. I mean, they don't set dead level, but they set slightly nose down. But when you put that extra weight on the front of it, you definitely pull the nose of the bait down a little bit more. So it's definitely something that I focus on. I'm never going to put the bigger hook on the back of the bait ever. So
you never tail weight it?
Never.
Okay.
No. Just, to me, the way the cast control in these baits is designed with the transfer in them, the baits just aren't designed. You know, if you had just an open bodied bait, it might be fine to do that. But when you've got that weight transfer that goes, when you pull the bait, that weight transfer goes to the front, and that's what's going to make that bait set at the level that it sets at. And when you tail weight it, you actually go away from that transfer utilizing itself in the water the way it needs to.
Definitely. Stephanie has a question. Is it better to use a jerk bait on a bait caster or a spinning reel?
I'm strictly a bait caster person. Occasionally, if I'm throwing a 95, which is the smaller 2-hook version, I don't guess I have one right here in this box that I brought in, but if I'm throwing the smaller 95 and I'm just trying to make sure I get the distance I want out of it, I occasionally go to a spinning rod. I just feel like I have way more control with a bait caster, not just from my ability to cast, but just when I work the bait, I don't feel comfortable working a jerk bait on a spinning rod the way I do with a bait caster. And, typically you can throw the correct line sizes on spinning rods. I think it's just, more a matter of what a person's comfortable with. I mean, we've seen for years, I feel like I'm pretty good with the jerk bait. I mean, but, Kevin, for a number of years throughout the course of time, we've watched him catch them really good on a spinning rod on a jerk bait. So, I think that more is a personal preference and, maybe just the size bait you're trying to throw.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I throw some more finessey type jerk baits, and I typically have a 10 or 15 pound braid tied to, a 10-foot leader of 8-pound fluorocarbon. And, and it gives me that, it just gives me that finessey feeling. Because to me, there's something about, I mean, I've got a pretty finessey bait casting jerk bait rod, but there's something about when I put a little, a smaller jerk bait that I almost feel like I need to go to a spinning rod. I don't know why. It's maybe in my head. I mean, besides being able to cast it, it just doesn't match up with me.
I think a lot of times, and if you really stop and think about it, when you talk finesse fishing, I mean, typically most times that we pick a spinning rod up, the retrieve ratio on a spinning rod is not near what it is on a bait caster in most situations. Typically, a spinning rod will make us as anglers a lot of times slow down. I mean, you've got to really get after it to fish a jerkbait fast on a spinning rod. I mean, I know when I've had guys in the boat with me that maybe aren't real skilled at throwing a bait caster and you tie a jerkbait on a spinning rod, it's like you get to watching how long it's taking them to retrieve a bait on the same cast you're making. It's like, man, you're going to have to really speed that thing up to keep, the pace you need to keep it at. But I think there's times when that spinning rod actually helps us as anglers slow down a little bit more. I mean, you know how much easier it is to pick up if you were trying to throw even an 1/8 or a 1/4 ounce jig or, finesse type jig on a bait caster versus a spinning rod, just how much slower you can make yourself fish it on a spinning rod. So I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
guys, if you got any questions on here for Mike, go ahead and get them in here.
Shoot them this way because we got a Razorback game, Final 8 coming up here pretty shortly. Anybody Razorback?
He's got priorities. I think there's some Mizzou fans in this part of the country.
I figure there probably is.
There's some Razorback fans.
Yeah, as bad as I hate to say it, it's going to be hard to get the Razorback out of me. I spent most of my younger years and adult life in Arkansas, and I'm a pretty hardcore Razorback basketball fan. It's pretty cool to see him back in the Final 8 this year. It's been a long time.
Once it's in the blood, it pretty much stays in the blood. That's just the way it is. So what are you throwing? We'll touch a little bit more on the RKCrawler. What's a good setup for the RKCrawler? Just if somebody was to just go out and buy a setup, what are they looking for like a crankbait rod and stuff?
For me, early in the spring, I mean, my ideal setup is a Bass Pro Shop Pro Qualifier 5. I think it's a 5.3 or 5.8 to 1 gear ratio reel, and I'm talking a little bit more for early spring. It's a rod and reel combination that you can get by with almost all year, except for that fall when you maybe really want to speed the bait up. But a 5 3-to-1 Pro Qualifier reel. Falcon builds such a broad variety of series of rods. I mean, anything from the Buku, the Lowrider, the Expert, all the way up to the Kara series. I mean, they've got a rod price point for anybody that wants to buy a rod. I mean, you know what I'm saying? They got a rod that starts in there at around $100, or if you want to buy the top of the line Kara, you can spend, close to $300 on a rod. But the thing that I've found with, especially the RKCrawler and really any crankbaits, The Cara, yeah, it's a lot more sensitive. It's a lot more, I guess you would just say, more crisp. But I've caught them just as good on the Buku as I have the Cara. And when I'm throwing the RKCrawler or a lot of smaller crankbaits, not just the RKCrawler, but just, Little John series, anything under, the size of a 55 or 55 or just slightly larger, I throw what is called a Mansfield, or the label on it is 417. So it's a 4-power rod. It's 7 foot long. The one stands for, it's a one-piece rod is the reason the one's in there. But it's a 7 foot rod, medium action rod. It's got, somewhat of a parabolic bend to it. I mean, but it's still got enough backbone that you can cast accurately. You don't feel like the rod's really noodling behind you when you're throwing it. And whether you're buying the Buku, the Lowrider, the Expert, or the Cara, that 417 day in, day out for the whole RKCrawler line. I mean, whether it's the XD50, the MD55, the RK55, that's the rod I go to day in, day out. And as far as line, the Sunline FC crank is, in my opinion, the best crankbait line that I've ever thrown. Diameter wise, I have to caution some of y'all. There's a lot of guys that for a lot of years I've heard talk about throwing, their crankbaits on 8 and 10 pound tests, certain brand lines. You really got to compare diameters, because a lot of line, the diameters are a lot bigger. Sunline, and that's the reason, like I said earlier, the FC crank, like 12 or 14 pound FC crank is the same diameter as the older monofilaments that I grew up throwing, that were 10 pound test or 8 pound test. So, you got to kind of be careful about when you start sizing the line to what you're used to throwing. I've told a lot of guys throw it on 10, and they throw it on 10 and they're like, man, that stuff's super, super small. It's, it's not as strong as what I'm used to throwing. Well, it's due to the fact that it's built on, true IFGA line standards. And you really got to pay attention to that, for fishing the lakes like I fish, Table Rock, Beaver, Bull Shoals, these Clearwater deep lakes. I want to get that bait as deep as I can. So, 8, 10, 12 is what I'm going to throw the most of. But for a guy that's used to fishing a Kentucky lake, a lake that's dirtier, you might want to look at 12 or 14 pound crank FC.
Yeah, that line diameter is, it varies in different brands. It is a big deal.
It's a big deal.
So that flipping line, you use that flipping line. I know that's one line that Sunline just came out with not too long ago.
Yeah, the flipping FC, and then there's also the new I just blanked on the name, the 2C F. Dadgummit, I'm just absolutely had a just mental block.
I was trying to save you. I can't help you though.
Yeah, it was a new line last year that Christie helped them with, and basically what it is the flipping FC that you're talking about is fairly bright in color.
It's got the different colors, every 3 feet or something.
But like the FC2C is like, it'll have a band of orange and then a band of clear. And basically what it allows you to do is you always tie your bait to the clear end, but when you're flipping, you'll have 2 or 3 strands of orange between you and the clear, and it allows great visibility for someone like myself. As you can see, I'm an eyeglass wearer now, and I've got to the point now where I just can't hardly see fluorocarbon. And whenever I get in those situations where I need to, flip bushes and I need to be watching my line, that FC2C is the way to go.
Yeah. J Buff has got a question. Please share your setup with live scope, the batteries, gauge wire, or like the C-Clear wiring system, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of guys talk about the C-Clear wiring system and how much difference it makes. I do know that when we rigged the live scope on my boat, or I should say when Bass Pro rigged it up there at the factory, that they ran the big heavy gauge wire all the way to the front. So I've got dedicated wires coming off of my Odyssey battery, my crank battery, all the way to the front of the boat. So I'm not running the power on the smaller gauge wire. And I think that's either a 10 or a 12 gauge wire, that comes from the battery. It's the same diameter or gauge wire that, your typical trolling motor wiring would be. So I've got dedicated wiring going to the live scope, and I feel like I'm pretty clean. I mean, I'm running a Motor Guide Tour Series Pro version. It's got the anchor mode, and I am playing with both the perspective bracket mount as well as the 0 degree mount. I've kind of come to the conclusion recently that when you first mount a live scope on your trolling motor, you'll notice it's got a little bit of a camber built into it. And I've learned by using either the perspective mount or going to the 0 degree mount that I can flatten that transducer out. And I feel like it cleans the bottom up a little bit. And I feel like I can see fish that are relating to the bottom a little bit cleaner than I could before with that little bit of camber. I mean, I understand why the camber is built into it. It's to make sure that that transducer is shooting away from the trolling motor itself. And I'm just basically building that out a little bit with the 0 degree mount to where I'm getting it out there, but I'm still shooting flat. And, I think the other thing that you got to play with is depth. I mean, you don't want to run it up so high that when you're cavitating a little bit, in wavy water, you want to keep that transducer as low as you can to the motor itself without getting it down there to the point where you're actually picking up part of the motor when you're shooting your beam through there.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question. What's
Yes.
the low visibility of water you throw a jerkbait in? Honestly, I think there's times that I have gotten away from fishing a jerkbait in as dirty a water as I used to. I mean, growing up here on Table Rock, I mean, I used to love it when we got the rains and the water got all dirty and mudded up. And I mean, honestly, I can look back and think of times that I've caught them on a Norman flake or a bone color or a clown colored jerkbait in water that you couldn't probably see, 8 to 12 inches down in.
Mm-hmm.
Watercolors change and vary so much. I mean, when you get that real mud, I mean, just that mud, I think a jerkbait becomes pretty ineffective. But the other thing that you've got to remember about a jerkbait, I mean, it's got noise, it's got flash, and I mean, fish don't quit eating shad because they don't make noise or they can't see them in dirty water. They keep eating them. And in my opinion, if fish are actively feeding on bait fish and the water temperature's right and they're actively feeding on bait fish, a jerkbait's always a good possibility. It's just changing the color to something that those fish can see in that dirty water, something that's more opaque, or sometimes, it takes a color like the clown color or something that's got a lot of flash, red or something in it to set that bait off a little bit more in that dirty water.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to say that the clown color is something that I've had a lot of success on in really stained water. And typically, like the jerkbait, normally we throw it when the water is really cold, and you don't have a whole lot of options in that dirty water. But something that I fish a lot is a big spinnerbait in that same scenario. As long as the water is about 43-ish, and the jerkbait, I feel like it's too dirty for a jerkbait, but I know the fish are up there shallow. That spinnerbait's something that I'll go with. There you go.
Like
yep.
Chrome, that's actually Dutch chrome instead of clown, and just a little bit different red hue to it and everything. But that is a really good off colored water bait. And then, like I said earlier, the Norman flake is probably one of my favorite dirty water jerkbaits. It's real opaque. It's got a lot of glitter built into it, so it does have pretty good flash. And I mean, when you think about it, you just mentioned throwing a spinnerbait in that colder water. I mean, typically when you throw a spinnerbait in muddy water, do you go to white blades occasionally?
I do sometimes, yes.
So, in my opinion, I mean, with the spinnerbait, you've got flash and vibration with the white blades. Dirty Bone's another, really good one in off-colored water. You got a little bit of chartreuse or yellow on the tail, pretty opaque, bone-colored body, and a little bit of dark on the head. So I'm going to change my colors up in dirty water. Then we've got, just the old typical black back gold sides with an orange belly is another really good color to throw in those dirty water situations.
Yep, exactly right. I think it's all about just getting it around the fish. They're, like you said, if they're up there, they're going to see it, they're going to hear it, and they're going to hit it if they're feeding on shad. Let me ask you just a couple more questions, and we'll let you go, because I know you got a game to watch here.
This next question I definitely wanted to address is the one Stephanie asked about reeling a jerkbait down versus just starting bait down.
Good.
The one thing for so many years of doing seminars about jerkbait fishing was I used to really preach against throwing a jerkbait out there and initially starting to work your cadence by jerking the bait. I always used to tell people, throw it out there, wind it down, and start fishing it. The thing that I've learned from live scope again is that all depends on where those fish are in the water column. So many times and so many days that I used to fish on Table Rock, not understanding where the fish were in the water column, I can remember all those days you'd throw the bait out there, you wind it down real fast, and the first jerk you made with it, one would get it. Well, now that I can see them on live scope, I realize that's those fish that are setting really high in the water column. I mean, you throw the bait out there and you wind it down, well, they start chasing it. And when you stop at that first time to give it a jerk, they finally catch up with it and eat it. So now when I see fish really high in the water column, it isn't uncommon for me to throw the bait out there, maybe just make a couple turns of the reel just to get the bait under the surface and then start working the bait. And again, it's one of those situations that live scope is really telling me now how I need to work the bait before I ever throw it to the fish. I mean, if they're down 10 feet, I want to reel it down and get it close to them. But if they're up there 3 or 4 feet under the surface, a lot of times I'm getting the bait underneath them, and they're not going to go down to feed on a bait very often. Generally, a jerk bait is a bait you want to keep above the fish. So whatever level those fish are at is where you need to be fishing it.
Yeah, that's cool. And with that live scope, I'm sure the thing that I think is, well, one of the things that's most impressive to me about the live scope is being able to change your cadence and watch how the fish responds to that jerk bait. I mean, that's really cool.
And the thing that's really opened my eyes up to is how shallow a fish will set even in open water. I mean, I don't know how many times I'll pull up out on one of these points and throw that live scope down, and you look out there and there's literally a bass setting 2 feet under the surface over 50 foot of water. I mean, you're just like, why is he setting there? And I think Spencer Sheffield was the one at I don't know how many of y'all saw the pro circuit event at Smith Lake, but Spencer Sheffield made the comment 2 or 3 times how close the fish that he was fishing for were under the foam of the docks or the black plastic floats of the docks. He's like, you almost didn't even realize it was fish because they were so far up in the water column. And he finally had to really lighten his bait presentation up to keep his bait high enough in the water column to even get the fish to react to it. So it's definitely opening our eyes up to the different cadences and how we need to work baits when those fish get real high in the water column.
Yeah, Jay says the way they've been jerking these live are out of my control. I've always gone up at a lower cadence.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that, has really opened my eyes up too. Just like you mentioned, the cadence. The last couple of springs, I mean, I remember last year on Table Rock when I first started fishing the lake, it was probably in the mid to upper 40s. And depending on the mood of the fish, there were days that I was working my bait way too slow. I mean, I'd see a group of fish sitting out there on a point, throw to them, work my bait down to them, and try to do the old, just dead stick it. And they would come look at it, and, I'd hit it and they might flash at it, but they just wouldn't commit. And then I found out that if I threw the bait to them, came to them and worked it really, really fast through the fish, that I could generally get one to commit and come out of that group of fish and eat it. So I think the thing that it's really opened our eyes up to is being able to adjust the cadence to the mood of the fish. There are those days that they want the bait sitting still. They want you to pause it a long time, but there's a lot more days, I think, now that I realize you can fish the bait a lot more aggressively than maybe I have throughout most of my jerkbait fishing years.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's happened to me a lot of times where you're actually trying to get the bait back in, and next thing you know, you get a bite. You know, you've been letting it sit for 6, 7, 8 seconds.
Yeah.
So,
the eye-opening.
yeah. So what do you think, in your opinion, what do you think is going to be going on Table Rock? April 17th and 18th. There's the BFLs are down there. Do you have any idea what stage the fish I know you can't tell until then, but what do you think will be going on?
Things happen so quick on this lake. I mean, like you were talking earlier, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me a bit with the full moon that we're in right now, even with the water temperatures being the way they are, if there's not some fish already spawning in the backs of some of these warmer creeks. I mean, by the middle part of April, if we land on another full moon, which from the dates that it sounds like we're going through, I mean, we could be on a new moon or potentially, you know, the coming of the next moon. I mean, there's a good chance you could be seeing a lot of spawning activity, especially if we get a lot of warm days. Now, I think it is supposed to cool off and, you know, you get a little bit of cooler weather, but typically April, middle to end of April and May is when a lot of fish will start spawning. And a lot of that's going to dictate what region of the lake you're fishing on. You know, I remember last year, well, it would have been the year before last. I mean, it had been relatively cold. And then like just before the full moon in April, it warmed up. And I mean, I was catching fish out in, like I said, 18 to 25 foot of water. I was catching them on a swim bait. I was catching them suspended out on deep points. And I mean, literally, we got 2 or 3 warm days, and it was like those fish weren't there. And I was like, man, I'm going to go up here by the bank. And it was just like they flooded the bank in a matter of days. So it's one of those situations that, you know, you're going to have to pay attention to the water temperature, the moon. And if you get a lot of, you know, warm days leading up to that event, there could definitely be a lot of spawning activity going on where, you know, a guy's going to have to slow down and probably throw a wacky worm, you know, throw a Ned rig, fish more plastics. But if you get some conditions, some windy, cloudy, nasty days, you know, those fish will still bite a rock crawler and a McStick and, you know, faster moving baits. I mean, you know, a small Big Bite Pro swimmer has been super effective for me. That little Big Bite finesse swimmer. You know, baits like that can definitely play if you just get a little bit of conditions. And when I say conditions, you know, a little bit of wind, a little bit of clouds, just something to you know, take that bright sunny glare off the surface of this water, because April means they want to swim to the bank and spawn. And as long as Mother Nature gives them those pretty sunny days, they're going to do it.
Yeah. Good deal. That's good to hear that. That's kind of, I was hoping it would be.
I was hoping pre-spawn would stick around a little bit longer, if you want to know the truth.
I know for me personally, I just start to get the feel of what's going on and get dialed in, and then it changes again. I'm like, other than the middle of winter and the middle of summer, you know, this time of year, everything's just changing so fast.
Yeah.
So it's hard on a guy to go fishing once a week.
Yeah, that's the other thing that Major League Fishing and you know, not just Major League Fishing, but all the live coverage that we have of tournament fishing today it's really opened your eyes up to how, and you know, I even look back through the course of my career. I mean, generally the practices that I have where I think I'm really, really on them and gonna catch them are some of the tournaments that I struggle the most in, and the tournaments that you just kind of start figuring it out as the tournament starts. It's like you really, really put it together in those situations. And the live coverage has just opened up, I think, everybody's eyes to, you know, we as anglers just kind of go with the flow a lot of times. I mean, you know, unless you're fishing, like you said, a wintertime tournament or a middle of the summer tournament where, you know, those fish are set up on ledges or brush piles or, you know, deep points where they're going to stay there. It's just going to be a matter of hitting them at the right time. It's pretty crazy how these events change day to day. I mean, you just look at the live coverage and it's like, you know, you're catching them on a jerkbait one day and the next day they're in the bushes because they've started spawning, kind of a deal. You know, it's pretty crazy how fast things do transpire on the water.
Oh, okay. Two more questions. I promise to let you go. I'm enjoying this a lot. What are some of the differences between that you've noticed between the catch, weigh, and release and the 5 fish limit? I mean, have you had to change up how you fish at all, or what are some things that's kind of jumped out about the two different formats?
Well, I'm going to be the first to admit I've done relatively well in some of the cup events, the catch, weigh, and release cup events where we have no practice. And I think that goes back to what I said earlier. I think I fish a pattern well. If I can get a little bit of something going, I can run with it and I can make a lot happen. The one thing that I have noticed in the every fish counts catch, weigh, and release Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour format is I think I've rushed myself as an angler. When I go back and watch live after I've been eliminated from a competition, all of a sudden I see these guys and they're still fishing at the same pace that I feel like we all fish at. But I think as an angler, I rush myself due to the fact that it just seems like a different feel. But when you really go back and analyze it, I mean, now that we've increased the minimum weight to 2 pounds, it isn't like they've turned into, just tons and tons of fish being caught. I mean, even when you look back at a Sturgeon Bay event, there were a lot of big weights put up at Sturgeon Bay. But when you really started calculating the average of size of fish and the numbers of those fish those guys were catching, I mean, it equated down to, catching, 6 or 8 fish a period. So I think that I have got to adjust my style of fishing just the way I like to fish more in the Bass Pro Tour. And the typical 5 fish tournaments, I think we as anglers get very, very lax in. I mean, when you've got 8 hours to get 5 bites, you just have a different mentality about it. The adrenaline rush that the score tracker creates in an angler is unbelievable. I mean, if you've never competed in an event where you have a live scoring system, it's incredible how much pressure that puts on you as an angler. I feel like I use it to my advantage because if I'm not catching them and the score tracker's going off, it's like, you better move, you better do something different. And, there's a lot of variations, and it truly is, it's a different sport than what we knew in the 5 fish tournaments. It's exhilarating. It's exciting. I haven't had a lot of great ones yet, but I want to get it figured out and be up there battling in that championship round,
So that clock is just
that clock will eat on you. Yeah. I mean, an 8-hour event where you're just trying to catch 5, some days it feels like that day lasts forever. And there's something about the days when you fish, even with the breaks and the things that are different about the catch, weigh, and release Bass Pro Tour events, man, it just seems like the days fly by. I mean, they get away from you so fast, it's unreal.
I think it's interesting. There'll be a lull fish for an hour.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, turn on.
Yeah. I will say that when you look at those lulls, and if you have an app, I've got an app that I use on my phone called Fishing and Hunting Solunar. And essentially it's just the prime movements of the day. It rates the day as far as the moon phase. And when you look back after one of the Bass Pro Tour events, when the lulls took place, the Solunar charts are really, really pretty much dead on. The one thing that I've learned is it isn't always at the peak that they bite the best, but sometime at the start, the peak, or the end of the movement, you're going to have a flurry. In the lulls, you can almost always count on it being pretty dead. But anytime that movement chart is going up or going down, something's going to happen during that time frame.
I've always wondered that. And I figured there had to be something to that.
Yeah, it definitely equates. I mean, I don't quit fishing during a lull, but I try to plan my day to be running down the lake during a lull rather than running down the lake during a movement period.
Awesome.
So that's definitely something to keep in mind.
All right, last question, Mike.
You bet.
What has fishing taught you about life?
You know, probably the biggest thing that fishing has taught me about life is just how, how fragile and how many more important things there are in life than fishing. I mean, as bad as I hate to say it, there was a period of time in my life where fishing was everything. And, you know, I finally realized that, you know, God created the outdoors. He created, you know, the space that we live in and the outdoors that we enjoy. And, you know, fishing's just what I do for a living. And, you know, as much as I love it, I have to understand that there's way more important things in life than fishing. And, you know, as exciting as it is and as awesome of a sport and clean of a sport it is for people to be involved in, I mean, you got to separate, you know, the things that are important in life and, you know, the time you spend on the water. And I feel very blessed to be put in the position that I've been put in. I've had some ups and downs, and, you know, every now and then you question, you know, am I not living right? Am I not doing things the way God wants me to be doing them right now? But, you know, it's one of those situations. You're going to have your ups and downs in fishing. And that's another thing. You know, it's taught me a lot of patience. I mean, a lot of guys, you know, that have a bad season or a few bad tournaments, they really get frustrated with themselves. And I'm going through a little frustration right now, but I realize it's just fishing. You know, it'll come back around, and I've been through enough of them that I know it's going to come back around, and I'm excited for the day when it starts turning.
Valley, brother.
All right, man.
All right. How can people follow you? You have
I've Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I have started a little series. I don't do it necessarily every Friday, but I try to do a Falcon Rods Friday where I'll break down, you know, what rods I'm using for specific applications. If I'm at a tournament, you know, talk about the tournaments and breakdowns. And, you know, I try to be as regular as I can on social. Like I said, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I've got a website if anybody wants to check out the website. And, you know, it's just cool to be able to expand my audience, visiting with your listeners. So I hope everybody will look me up. And, you know, I'm fairly good about answering some questions on messages and things like that. But, you know, we're running all the time, so it keeps us busy. And if I don't get back to you, don't take it personally.
okay.
All right. I almost left you hanging tonight. Thank goodness my wife caught the email when she did.
Hey, I told the folks at home that you called me right after you got out of the store, and I tried to talk you into coming on the stream.
Yeah, it wasn't going to happen. I literally got out of the shower 5 minutes before I was supposed to be on the show, and Stacy's like, "Oh my gosh, you forgot your radio show," and I'm like, "Oh man!" But I put it together pretty quick. Maybe a little red face from the hot shower I took, but other than that, I think we're good to go.
Hey, everything worked out like it's supposed to. So we'll let you go, Mike. Good luck out there the rest of the season, and really appreciate you coming on here. And it was great hanging out with you, man.
All right, man. And let's root them Hawgz on. Go Hawgz.
Go Hawgz. See you, buddy.
We'll see y'all.
All right, guys. That was a lot of fun. Great interaction with Mike. Really appreciate him jumping on and spending some time with us this evening. He was rushed, but he just flowed right in, and it was smooth as butter. So good stuff. Lots of good, detailed information on, you know, the McStick and the RKCrawler and stuff. This is one that I'm definitely going to have to go back and listen to and take notes. You know, one thing when you're in the middle of doing these streams, you know, you're looking at the comments, you're kind of halfway listening to the guests and stuff. So, but you can't really soak it all in because you're kind of, you know, it's kind of split and stuff. So I definitely go back and listen to the streams and suck up the stuff that the guests are saying, especially somebody like Mike. I mean, he was dropping some good nuggets, and I'm excited about that deep dive in McStick. That is really, really cool. I throw the McStick quite a bit, and I throw the RKCrawler as well. They got that suspended version. Before I let you go, there's been several questions on here about Kincaid and about Lake of Egypt, and I'd like to invite you guys back this Thursday at 7:30. This is something that Ron DeRosa and I are doing weekly. We're doing a fishing reports live stream, and we're just trying to create a community where people can come on the live stream. People can shoot me messages at Gabe Montgomery Fishing or 10 Horse Monty on Facebook or 10 Horse Monty 6 on Instagram. If they've been out on the water over the week, they can share those reports with me, and I'm going to write down a running list. And that way on the live stream on Thursday nights at 7:30 Central, I can read off, the conditions, maybe what some baits that are working for certain lakes, and we can cover a big area of the area. We can cover a lot more water than just me and Ron, or Ron and I. So I encourage you guys to help participate in that and help this thing grow. So it's Thursday, 7:30 Central. So we will answer. We're definitely going to have a good detailed Lake of Egypt report because Ron lives on Lake of Egypt. I've been out on several lakes lately. I've got some pretty good reports. We're going to have Eric Prey. He is a guide from Table Rock Focused Fishing. I talked to him last week, and he's going to jump on. We are going to have Mike Russell from Kentucky Lake. He's going to give us an update on Kentucky Lake. And also talk to Matt from 3 Pound Fishing. So you guys out there and girls out there that are crappie folks, Matt is a guide on Lake of Egypt. He fishes Wren, he fishes Crab Orchard. He's even over there on Cedar. And he's going to jump on for a little bit and kind of give us a crappie update. So we're going to have lots of different areas, lots of different lakes covered, and we're trying to just really build this. And I guess it's all up to you guys too to give us feedback to make it even bigger. So anyway, appreciate everybody for coming on here. It was a great stream. It was good to see everybody out there, and we will see you Thursday.